and welcome back to another chapter of It Hurts to Hope by Inquilidori on AO3. Chapter 13, A Matter of Stolen Time. Zelkwa dangles his leg over the side of the roof and leans into the breeze, letting it blow through his hair and feathers. He smiles and tilts his head back, enjoying the warm sunlight on his face. It didn't take very long for him to discover that the roof of Momo's base made an excellent place to hang out, and ever since then he's come up at least once every day. Sometimes the local songbirds join him, and even though he's not avian enough to talk to them, he still enjoys trying to copy their trills. The now familiar sound of rockets hits his ears, and he opens his eyes in time to see an armored figure lightly touching down on the edge of the roof, knees bending to absorb the impact of the land. "Hello, Zelkwa," Zuma says, straightening up and folding his elytra against his back. Do you mind if I join you?" "No," Zelkwa replies, because the admin is obviously here for a reason. Out of all the hermits, he's one of the ones that Zelkwa sees the least, and he knows that his visits aren't normally casual. Exuma dips his head briefly in thanks, and sits down next to Zelkwa on the rooftop. His boots dangle off the edge to join Zelkwa's shoes, and he laces his gloved fingers together. He doesn't say anything for several moments, but Zelkwa waits. He's good at waiting, and he wants Exuma to speak first. "I'd like to start with reiterating the backstory rule," Exuma starts, and immediately Zelkwa is on edge. "There is no pressure to reveal your story to anyone, anytime. So even though I am doing this, there isn't a reason for you to do it in return. It's just that certain people, and me, I suppose, think it will be beneficial for you to hear my story. You don't have to tell me anything." "You don't have to tell me anything," Zelkwa says. Exuma shakes his head and looks over at Zelkwa, the barest gleam of his eyes visible behind the purple visor. "It's not that. You're one of my hermits now, for however long you choose to stay, and not telling you means that this animosity between us can't be laid to rest. I have no wish to be your enemy, but it's hard for me to trust, and you deserve to know why." "You've met the Watchers before, haven't you?" Zelkwa asks. It's more of a statement than a question. He's been putting the pieces together ever since his first meeting with the admin. They've only confirmed when Exuma laughs softly. "Something like that. Honestly, I think I always knew this was going to happen at some point. But I was stalling for time. I was scared, and still am, really. But I've got very persistent friends, and I think it's time." Exuma pauses, and Zelkwa stays silent. Finally, the admin reaches for his helmet and pulls it off, taking a deep breath. Zelkwa knows that Voidwalkers struggle to breathe in the overworld, and knows Exuma is enough to surmise that taking the helmet off is a sign of trust. He did it before, when Zelkwa was still in the room. Even then, he'd been trying to trust Zelkwa. It hurt something in him that he hasn't been able to do the same. Exuma sets the helmet next to him, and Zelkwa thinks that he's done, but then he reaches for his gloves. And Zelkwa is struck by the thought that he's never seen Exuma without his gloves before. He wonders if anyone has. Gently, carefully, Exuma pulls the fabric off his arms, and allows the sunlight to fall on pale skin and slender fingers. His hands fully exposed to the world, and Zelkwa's gaze. And they're scarred. Zoa's never seen anything like it. The splintering, shard-like scars trail up and down the admin's skin, unnatural and strange, like pale cracks that threaten to shatter his hands into pieces. Zelka knows what scars look like. He has enough of his own. But he doesn't remember ever seeing anything like these. I haven't told many people about where I came from, Xuma says quietly, tangling his exposed fingers together, as if trying to protect them from the air. It doesn't get easier every time I tell my story, but maybe one day it will. Take your time, Zelka says awkwardly, because he doesn't know what to say in this kind of situation. Zuma gives him a lopsided smile that communicates his similar unsureness. Alright, the Voidwalker says, pulling in a breath of air that is too heavy for his lungs. Alright. And so Zuma tells Zelka his story, and it's like nothing he could have ever imagined or expect. Exuma lived in the Deep End. It's a common misconception that there's only one type of void, the one that lies under the End's pale islands, inky blackness that there is no escape from if you fall in. But there's actually several different types of void, all connected through delicate strands of life and unlife. There's the void of the End, of course. Then there's the in-between void that protects servers and worlds. There's also the void of Limbo, which is said to be where players go when they die. And then there's the Deep End. The easiest way to explain it would be to imagine the end, and then stack another layer underneath it, and something like a basement. A darker, although more vibrant end, with vast cities and rich wildlife. Some of the cities ended up in the end, called the Upside Down by the Deep End locals. Those cities are nothing but ruins now, but there are still things left over from the civilizations that lived there. There were many types of beings that thrived in the Deep End, and one of those types were Voidwalkers, creatures of the dark and the void. They could breathe the empty air of the End, and were naturally attuned to the finer workings of the universe and the code that weaves it together. Exuma was born in one of these vast Deep End cities, and that was where he grew up. Even at a young age, he exhibited a potential of code weaving that not many his age could master, and he was proud to learn the more detailed workings of the universe. But then the Watchers came. Exuma doesn't remember how it started, just that suddenly, all in one moment, there was smoke, screams, and the sound of explosions. And strange, ethereal beings outside with many wings and many eyes, watching and waiting as the city crumbled around itself. People trying to escape and fight back the cataclysm that was tearing them apart. Exuma coughed and stumbled against the wall, the smoke rating against his throat and still stinging his eyes, so different from the usual color, clear air of his home. The usual cold, clear air of his home. He knew what lay outside. He knew that his best bet was to get out of the city, to try and hide in the surrounding wilderness, but the Watcher's words rang in his head again, tearing his legs weak. "We wish for your youngest," the Watchers had hummed, speaking, and yet not at the same time. Exuma knew code, but he didn't know these things, taking up space in the air, yet not existing at the same time. The ones which show the most power. Your city will be left untouched if you turn them over to us. Exuma's people had refused, and so the Watchers attacked. They used no weapons, made no movements, yet they brought the city down anyways, slowly forcing it to self-destruct, painfully, brick by painful brick. The smoke was getting thicker, and Exuma forced his legs to move, stumbling onto shaky feet and bolting for the door. It took half a minute to get out of his house, and another minute to get down into the street. But the chaos there wasn't much better. Houses crashed against each other, the delicate and beautiful architecture that Exuma had loved so much turning into a death trap for anyone inside. Bridges and roofs collided in bursts of wood and stone. "Suma!" someone yelled, and Exuma spun on his heel, nearly losing his balance as a familiar red and black figure burst from a side street, broadsword gripped tightly in his hand. "EX?" he gasps, and his twin brother skidded to a stop, checking him from head to toe for injuries. "It's a good thing you weren't stupid enough to stay in the house," EX said with his usual spite. But there was an underlying current of relief. Despite their differences and daily arguments, EX and Exuma were still brothers, and they cared for each other more than words could describe. EX latched onto Exuma's hand and started dragging him through the streets at a pace Exuma could barely keep up with, still trying to dispel the smoke from his lungs. "Where are we going?" he rasped, and EX glanced back over his shoulder at his twin. "As far away as we can get," was the reply, and Exuma felt silent, allowing EX to pull him away and through the city. Exuma's city was a fairly small one, but built on the edge of a larger island. Exuma always liked going to the edge, sitting down on one of the docks so it was only him and the stars above and under, where he could hear the code whisper to him, and he could whisper back. EX was pulling him in the direction of the docks, though Exuma had no idea why. Wouldn't it be safer to hide in the forest? Try and escape the Watcher's eyes that way? "EX, what are you doing?" Exuma finally asked, tugging on his twin's hand. The grasp only tightened, and he pulled harder. "EX!" "We're getting out of here," EX spat back, stopping so abruptly that Exuma slammed into his back. "If we jump in the void, you can code weave us out of here, and into the in-between. My weaving is shit, but it should be enough to protect me if you handle the heavy lifting." There was no bitterness, no ire in EX's tone when he admitted that Exuma was the better code weaver. They both always known who the more powerful twin was. Maybe that was why EX has always been so daring, more willing to take risks, a desperate last-ditch effort to be noticed, to break free from his brother's shadow. Exuma shook himself mentally and straightened up. There was no time to reminisce on what had been, because right now, both their lives were in danger. "Fine," he said, because it wasn't even that bad of a plan, all things considered. Because it was the only one they had. And if Exuma tried to strategize, he wouldn't be able to gather all of his frazzled thoughts. "Fine," EX repeated, nodding once. He turned back towards the street, then froze, because there, touching down onto the broken road in front of them, was a Watcher. Voidwalkers. It buzzed, wings folding and fluttering around as its many eyes blinked at the two frozen escapees. "You, the Elder, we require your presence. Come with us." Exuma was 3 minutes older than EX, but he had never thought it very important until now. Apparently EX didn't think much of it either, because he stepped in front of Exuma and raised his sword, like he was the older sibling, and it was his job to protect Exuma, and not the other way around. "We're twins, dickhead!" EX snarled and glanced over his shoulder at Exuma. "Sumo, run!" You won't make it out, Exuma cried back, because it was all happening too fast. And all he knew was that he wouldn't lose his brother. But you will, EX said, and gave him a harsh shove, at odds with the soft look in his eyes, one that Exuma had never seen on his twin. Run. So Exuma ran. He turned tail and fled, not daring to look back as he heard EX shout a challenge and leap for the Watcher with his sword. The sword that he had made himself and enchanted by hand, and was so fiercely proud of. Exuma ran and told him that no matter what, he would make it out alive, or otherwise EX's sacrifice would be in vain. He ran and lied to himself that EX would be alright. He was a formidable fighter and always better than Exuma, and he could definitely take on the Watcher, one of the universe's most powerful beings. He couldn't make himself believe that big of a lie, but he still ran. And when he made it to the edge of the island, the docks that he used to sit on reduced to nothing but ruins, he didn't even pause. He jumped. The moment his feet left the island, he felt every eye snap to him, alerted that one of their prey was escaping, something close to human anger flaring up. But it was too late. Exuma fell into the void, and there was nothing the Watchers could do. He twisted around and observed as his home fell away. He plummeted into the stars. He felt the Watchers' eyes on him, and they looked on, and their anger sharpened into cold amusement. "We will always be able to see you, Voidwalker, no matter how far you run," they hummed, and their words rattled him all the way down to his soul. "You cannot escape our eyes." I could try, Exuma thought, and that was when he hit the void. The void in the deep end is different from other voids. Older, darker. It doesn't suffocate Voidwalkers like it does players. The nothing air easy to breathe for the end-born beings, but it hurt. If he had any energy left in his body, Exuma would have screamed. The void pulled at his very cold, shattering him and pulling him back together. It rose around him, sucked him in, spat him out. It broke his bones into stardust and reformed them into obsidian, thrashed him about and let him sink endlessly. It threatened to squeeze him into nothing, to scatter him across the stars. He was everywhere and nowhere. He was Exuma, and he was void. It was a sea of darkness that clung to his every movement, and the ocean of shadows that he couldn't fight his way out of. It weighed down his limbs like tar, and slithered along his face like oil. Even though he could still breathe, he felt like he couldn't. It felt like 1,000 deaths, over and over and over again. Millions of second-long lives, broken into shattered fragments. Over and over, an eternity of darkened sea and stars, dragging him down, pinning him, crushing him, breaking him. Exuma didn't know how long he fell. Sometimes it felt like it had been a lifetime, sometimes just seconds. But somewhere in that second-long infinity, he reached for the code, and he pulled. He could practically feel himself coming apart at the seams, tugged and yanked in so many directions, he didn't even know how much of him there was left. But he still managed to latch his thinkers onto the code of the universe, and ripped a hole big enough for him to slip through. Exuma fell into the calming expanse of the between-world void, and could finally breathe. He survived, but he would forever bear the scars of his journey, forever bear the mark of what he had been willing to do in order to escape the Watchers and their ever-seeing eyes. And so Exuma kept running, kept hiding. He wove code around himself to hide from the Watchers' gazes, and ran as far away as he could. He made a helmet to protect against the overworld's heavy air, made armor to hide the scars that trailed across the skin. The marks were fainter across his face, so they were less noticed by others. He met friends, created worlds, and eventually became admin of Hermitcraft, which was the best thing to ever happen to him. He even found EX again, who had survived the Watcher's attack, and spent his time similarly to Exuma, hiding from the beings that hunted for their blood. Exuma never did tell anyone about his story, and the hermits were content to leave it alone. They never asked him for details, never pushed him for more, and learned that when it came to new nicknames, anything was allowed except for Suma. He did everything. He did eventually tell Doc and Joe, and neither of them shied away from his past, something he was eternally grateful for, but he never lost the fear that somehow, someday, the Watchers would find him again, find him and his family, in the home he worked so hard to protect. He never got rid of the paranoia that had him jumping at sensor glitches, checking in daily with all his hermits, watching them like hawks when they went off-world. He already lost one family. He didn't want to lose another. And then Zelka came. And then you came. Exuma's voice trails off, and they sit on the roof in silence. Voidwalker and Watcher, letting the quiet wrap around them like the cold embrace of the void. I'm sorry, Zelka says, and Exuma turns to him with an open mouth, already beginning to say that he has nothing to apologize for. No, stop. I know it wasn't my fault. I probably wasn't even born at that point, but I'm sorry anyways. I'm one of them, and they did that to you. He glances down at the splintering scars on Exuma's hands, then looks away, not wanting to stare. You're not one of them, Exuma says, and he says it so simply, so calmly. Zelka almost believes it for a moment. You could just as easily be me sitting where you are now. Even then, they were looking for powerful players to turn into them. I escaped. You didn't. And for that, I'm truly sorry. There wasn't anything you could have done. You barely escaped them yourself. And because of that, they took you. There is no one at blame here except for them. Zelka knows that. Exuma knows that. But the blame game will continue until they can barely remember why they're blaming themselves, because that's how ruined lives work. Exuma found his truth, recovered from the Watcher's gazes at least partially. Zelka doesn't know where his truth is yet. He doesn't know if he'll ever recover. But sometimes he feels like he might. When he goes flying with False, or when he plays music with Mumbo and Scar, or teases Impulse, however cautiously, he feels like there is a life for him. Part avian, part Watcher, part mess. He feels like maybe he can learn to be a person again, after the Watchers try to make him into a god. The thought stours in his mind like spoiled milk. Maybe it can, but it won't be here. Thank you for allowing me to stay here for so long, Zelka says, and Exuma immediately looks to him in surprise. I realize now how dangerous it is. I mean, I was aware before, of course. That's why I've been waiting until my energy is high enough so I can void travel again. But with you already being on the Watcher's bad side, it's much too dangerous for me to stay here any longer. I'll leave as soon as I can. What? Exuma's words are thick with confusion, and then suddenly he rocks forward as the realization hits him. Zelka, that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. There is no pressure to leave. Honestly, I think most of the hermits would be happy for you to simply become one of us. They're already treating you like family. But Zelko struggles for words for a long moment, wondering how he can make Exuma understand. It's dangerous. I'm putting you all at risk by simply being here. They'll be looking for me, and they simply will find me. I can't endanger all of you like that. Zelqua, how do you think I've escaped their eyes for so long? I'm assuming Hermitcraft is cloaked in highly advanced code. I even felt some of it when I broke in. As a Void Walker, your code weaving is much more powerful than an average admin's. Exactly! Exuma laughs softly and leans back on his scarred marked hands, tilting his head up to catch the warm sun. Hermitcraft is one of the most protected worlds. Only the huge public servers like Hypixel have higher security. And even then, theirs is more concentrated on keeping hackers and viruses out. I'm designed most of the security measures around Hermitcraft specifically with Watchers in mind. Honestly, I have no idea how you got in like you did. Maybe it's because I'm not a full Watcher? Zelko suggests, and Exuma nods thoughtfully. Maybe, he agrees, then continues undeterred. But that's why this is probably the best place for you to be. Hermitcraft is the safest world to hide from Watchers on. And we're well known for being a server where you can leave your past behind. It's why my hermits come from every corner of the world. We're all weirdos in our own sense, so if you don't want to leave, you don't have to. Yoko finds that there is something in his throat, preventing him from speaking. He opens and closes his mouth a few times, but nothing comes out. He's pretty sure there's dust in his eyes. I don't have to leave? He finally chokes out, and Exuma nods calmly, like he hasn't just upended Zelqua's entire world. We're perfectly safe here, safer from the Watchers than anything else. If I'll be honest, I've been paranoid about them for years, and I'm not about to stop now. So I can stay? Zelka says, repeating his question but in a different way. He needs to hear it again, maybe even 3 times more. 50 more times? Just to make sure it's real. Yes. Exuma confirms, you can stay however long you'd like. You can be a hermit if you want. I can whitelist you so you're an official member of the server. A hermit? Him? Zelqa the half-baked watcher. The avian who doesn't understand his instincts. The once player who is still scared of hugs. Zelqa the hermit. Yes, Zelqa says and throws his arms around Exuma's neck, pulling him close with his wings beating excitedly around both of them. Yes, yes, yes! Exuma lets out a surprised laugh, but returns from the embrace, strong hands of firm support on Zelqua's back. He's not nearly as intimidating without his helmet, and he's the perfect height for Zelqa to fit his head under the admin's chin. Wonderful, Exuma says, and he sounds like he genuinely means it. He gently squeezes Zelqua's shoulder and then leans back, settling back down on the roof. Zelqa folds his wings back and pulls his hands away, watching as Exuma reaches for his gloves. Why do you wear them? Zelqa blurts, and Exuma glances up at him questioningly. The gloves? The armor? It's just the helmet that helps you breathe, right? Exuma nods, but doesn't say anything. He seems to be considering something, and Zelqa is immediately worried that he's overstepped. I don't want them to be the only physical detail and people remember about me. Zelqa Exuma finally admits. And something about that seems wrong to Zelqua. Wouldn't people remember his eyes? His hair? Or skin tone? What do you mean? Zelqua asks. And Exuma smiles sadly, like he's been expecting that question for a long time. Describe my face, he requests quietly. All right, Zelqua says, completely baffled. He looks up at Exuma's expression and starts with, "Your eyes are..." He trails off. Tries again. Exuma watches with sad, accepting look in his eyes as Zelqua struggles for words. The color of your hair is... your eyes... There's nothing. He's looking right at him, and yet he can't squeeze out a single word. He struggles for a long moment, mouth opening and closing, and the strong silence stretches out. Exuma's smile twists into something that might be a little more bitter, and he puts the gloves aside. You can't, can you? He asked softly. You can't describe what color my eyes are, or the tone of my skin. You can't tell me what my hair looks like. Such is the curse of the Voidwalkers. We are born from the void, which is to say, we're born from nothingness, so there's nothing for us to be. He sighs and reaches for the gloves again, breaking eye contact. You don't really notice until it's pointed out. It's why when people try to describe me, the only thing they can say is that I'm tall, that I wear a helmet, and that my skin is covered in scars that look like I was shattered into pieces and poorly glued back together. It's easier to hide them to be an enigma. I don't want my scars to be the thing people know me by. Exuma slides the gloves back on and hides his hands from the world again. He reaches for his helmet, but Zelqua stops him. Your eyes are kind, he blurts. And Exuma looks at him again, confused. Zelqua feels his eyebrows squeeze together as he speaks, concentrating on how as hard as he can. Your eyes are kind, he repeats, and your smile is both happy and sad, like you'll do anything to protect those you love, but you fear that you'll fail them. You look fierce, like someone who will fight the world to save your home. Your laugh is abrupt, like even you're surprised by it. You frown sometimes, but you're never really mad. He meets Exuma's eyes, the eyes that he can't understand the shape of, can't comprehend the color of, and he holds their gaze. Your eyes are kind, he says one last time. They both know that those few words mean everything in this moment. And so they sit on the roof, Voidwalker and Watcher, and let the silence wrap around them like the cold embrace of the void. They talk about the past, the present, and the future. And at some point, Exuma turns to Zelqua and asks the one question he had been hoping to avoid. Why do you keep running? He asks. And Zelqua sighs and looks up at the sky, turning from a baby blue to the dove gray of dusk. He doesn't look at Exuma as he emits the answer. It's all I know how to do. Exuma doesn't say anything, but he leans over and puts an arm around Zelqua's shoulders, pulling him close as if to ward against the evening chill. Now you can learn how to live, Exuma says, and Zelqua hums his agreement, resting his head on Exuma's shoulder. He knows that's a lie. Exuma says that the surfer is safe, but he'll never let one of his hermits be taken away. But Zelqua knows that'll change when the Watchers come, because they always come. But for now, he can lie to himself. He can stay and trick himself into believing that he's safe here, that he can build a house, and he won't have to leave it behind. He's living on borrowed time anyways. He can pretend that the sands in his hourglass aren't rapidly draining, and he can pretend that this can be his home. But the Watchers always come, And Zelka knows it's just a matter of time. A matter of stolen time. And that is the end of chapter 13.